If this movie's anything to go by, in 140 years, out of all the music that mankind has created throughout the evolution of history, the only one that's gonna stand the test of time and live on into the future is dubstep. After a life-changing incident at his job, Max, an ex-con played by Matt Damon, must find a way to reach Elysium, a station that was built in space to separate the wealthy from the poor to lower middle class, which were pretty much forced to stay on Earth while the rich people stayed in Elysium living their luxurious lives. This is written and directed by Neil Blomkamp, who wrote and directed District 9. If you guys don't remember back from my top 10 movies of 2009, District 9 was number 1. So putting it mildly, my expectations were really high. And I tried my best to kind of lower my expectations because I didn't want to feel disappointed should this have not even met the standards of District 9. So I went into this movie with some moderate expectations. So if you're like me who loved District 9, go into this movie thinking to yourself, it could go either way. Now coming out of it, I could say that it was a good film, but not the kind of film that's gonna help Neil Blomkamp achieve Christopher Nolan status. Blomkamp, like a lot of directors from this year with their science fiction movies like Guillermo del Toro with Pacific Rim, or I don't remember his name, but the guy who directed Tron Legacy did with Oblivion, he obviously loves science fiction to a T. And the movie definitely shows that, and you know, so far his track record has been nothing but sci-fi movies, including his next project. I can't remember, I think the name was going to be called Chappie. It's like a science fiction comedy. He's tackling comedy this time. But it is going to be focused on science fiction again. So you can tell he loves science fiction, and it shows even more when you look at the technology in this movie. And you know, some of the technology is a little smart, some of the technology is really badass. The exosuit that Max has to wear is really awesome, even though it involves having to drill, you know, things into your head, which is kind of ugh. But still, it looks really awesome. It does awesome things, and a lot of the technology that Elysium has is also pretty cool. I mean, no cancer. I'm off, man. No need to coming back to Earth, man. Fuck Earth. But much like Oblivion, I consider this to be the R-rated version of Oblivion, in which it's a good movie. It pays a great tribute to science fiction, but along with paying tribute to science fiction, it also takes elements from science fiction that you've seen before. And on top of that, actually, Oblivion took things from science fiction that we've seen before and compiled them into this nice little gift set of a movie, whereas Elysium makes its own technology and makes its own little science fiction lore, but it takes story elements, you know, things from you know, things that involve the story, things that involve the characters that you've seen in other science fiction movies, not so much the technology, but the character elements and the story elements, and takes them and puts them here and connects them with tissue that is quite original. That tissue that I'm talking about mostly comprises of the premise of the story. I really like the premise because I was hoping that it was going to deliver some sort of social political message like District 9 did. District 9 touched on a lot of issues involving racism, xenophobia, politics, that sort of thing, involving aliens. Here I was thinking of the same thing, and to an extent it kind of does, but it doesn't fully flesh it out like District 9 is, because District 9 had that documentary feel to make it a little more real, whereas here it's a straight narrative with, you know, it's a regular movie. You know, even though District 9 was also mostly a regular movie, the first, you know, 30-45 minutes of the movie is documentary style footage. So taking away that documentary feel kind of took away a bit of that oomph that District 9 had, and I was given the understanding that that social message was going to be explored in this movie because you got the, you know, the poor to lower middle class society stuck on Earth, while you got the higher upper class in Elysium living out their ordinary lives like nothing's happening. So I was hoping that the movie was gonna flesh that out, but it doesn't really do that because it falls back on similar story tropes, and instead of making it fully realizing that message, instead, you know, the rich guys, they're bad guys. They're just, you know, I don't want to say generic bad guys, but they're just the typical bad guys that you need in a movie like this when you need your hero to become triumphant. And I found it kind of funny how this movie depicted rich people, because apparently rich people are just as poor as the poor people on Earth because they cannot afford different set of clothes. Every rich guy was wearing the same polo shirt. And other parts of that tissue are some, you know, plot elements that I did like how they intertwined together, and mainly plot elements that involved Max's goal. Max, the things that Max has to do in order to achieve his trip to Elysium, the things that he has to achieve, almost play out like a really smart video game. This movie can be compared to a video game in a lot of ways, but not in a way where you're like, oh my god, this is so over the top and ridiculous that it should be a video game. Not like that. It's more like, okay, this is some very ingenious plotting that if I was playing a video game like this, I would feel very intense and very focused on this goal, and I would think that this is an amazing game. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the movie's not as polished in terms of its script as District 9 was. I mean, directing, I thought it was really great. There was some good cinematography, some really cool shots. There's two shots in the movie in particular where it looks like they use that image stabilizing technique that certain high definition cameras have, where you could hit that button and instead of looking all shaky cam, it looks like your main subject of the shot is standing still and the background is the only thing that's moving. There are two shots in this movie that they use that, and it's done really well. It felt like a video game, but in a good way, where it's not like silly and over the top, but it felt like a really cool, dynamic looking scene, and it's used to great effect. Some good fights involving gunfire, gunplay, and specifically gunplay, because whenever there was shooting in the movie, whenever they were using some of the cool science fiction weapons, it looked awesome, it looked amazing. But I don't know what it is, but I guess Blomkamp is a little unexperienced when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, because every time that somebody fought with their hands, when they had to engage in hand-to-hand combat, whether it be between Max and a robot or Max and Kruger or one of our main villains, the camera is just going crazy, and I just can't. It's so bad that it's actually kind of Transformers bad. All right, I couldn't focus on who was punching who, and I had to pay uber attention in order to focus. Okay, who's the one who just got punched? Who's the one who just got kicked? Neo. When people are fighting hand to hand, there's obviously going to be an awful lot of movement, so the key objective is to not move the camera so much so we can keep up with their movement. When they're using a gun, they're not going to be moving too frequently unless it gets a little too frenetic, so adding the shaky cam there wouldn't be that much of a problem. So for those of you who get motion sickness, you've been warned. And part of the reason why I don't think that this was as polished as District 9 in its writing is maybe because of my expectations. But, the District 9 did so many things that were very smart and very pulled back in order to make it look realistic, and one of those things is obviously the documentary style. But even taking that away, Elysium sometimes gets a little too blockbustery, where, some of your villains are kind of typical villains. They're not generic. I mean, Kruger is different than some. At least he looks different than your traditional villain. But, they try to give him this whole background of him having psychological issues, and I'm like, it's like you're trying to remake the Joker, trying to make this sociopathic villain, but he just comes off as typical. Same goes for Jodie Foster, same goes for William Fichtner. Performance-wise, all three of them were great. In fact, Charlton Copley, it's his name is always the toughest to pronounce, but the guy who played Kruger, who is also the guy who played Vickers van der Merwe in District 9, the main character in District 9. I thought, translating from his character in District 9 to his character in the A-Team to now this, I think he's a terrific actor. In my opinion, I think his performance in District 9 was quite a bit of an Oscar-worthy performance. Here, it's not so much Oscar-worthy, but it was good. It's just the way he was directed and written, it was like, kind of been there, done that. Plus, his motives as to why he is the way that he is ain't exactly clear. I mean, I would have liked it if he was developed a little bit better, and the same goes for Jodie Foster's character. Now, on the good side of things, Matt Damon is great as Max, and Max is very sympathetic. He's very likable, very charismatic, and his background, even though it is a little, I don't want to say cliched, but just general, you still end up liking the guy, and you still end up, siding with him when it comes to the decisions that he makes throughout the course of the movie. Overall, it was a good movie, a good action movie to release at the sunset of the summer. But it wasn't the smart science fiction epic that District 9 was. It wasn't the magnus opus that District 9 was. And because of the fact that District 9 was such an amazing movie, my expectations for this was significantly high, and as hard as I tried to lower those expectations, I can't help but feel just a little let down because of the fact that this guy created such an amazing movie on his directorial debut. for a feature-length movie. Before he did that, he did a short in which District 9 is inspired from. It's actually based on that short that he did. So knowing that this is his follow-up film, it's a good follow-up film, but it didn't outdo his previous work. That's not, however, going to stop me from checking out the rest of his directorial career. I give Elysium an 8.3 out of 10, which is a B. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.